It started, like so many bad things do, with a project I'd left until the last minute. My name's Ben. I was a grad student in literature at Columbia, and my thesis was on the use of architectural space as a character in 20th century Gothic fiction. It was a pretentious way of saying I spent a lot of time thinking about creepy houses. To give it some unique flair, I decided to focus part of my research on the New York Public Library's main branch on Fifth Avenue, the Stephen A. Schwarzman Building. You know the one with the stone lions, patience and fortitude, guarding the steps. It's a temple of knowledge, a beautiful, imposing fortress of limestone. But my interest wasn't in the grand reading rooms or the Rose main reading room's celestial ceiling. It was in what wasn't on the public tours, the sub-basements. The miles of stacks that run under Bryant Park, a labyrinth of steel and concrete filled with millions of books, many of which haven't seen the light of day in decades. I'd managed, through a connection with a professor who knew a curator, to get special after-hours access for a week. The goal was to examine some old acquisition ledgers and architectural plans stored in a small, windowless office deep in the administrative warren on the first mezzanine. The first couple of nights were fine, if a little eerie. The library after dark is a different creature. The daytime murmur of tourists and researchers is replaced by an immense, profound silence, broken only by the distant hum of the HVAC system and the occasional echoing footstep of a security guard on his rounds. The light is dimmed, pools of warm yellow from brass lamps creating long, stretching shadows between the towering bookshelves. You feel very small and very alone. On the third night, Maya came with me. Maya was in my program, a sharp, witty girl from Boston with an encyclopedic knowledge of Victorian poetry and a smile that could short-circuit my brain. We'd been dancing around something more than friendship for months, a slow, tantalizing burn of lingering glances and casual touches that never quite escalated. She'd offered to help me sift through the dusty boxes, claiming an interest in archival research, but the unspoken tension hung in the air between us, thick as the dust motes dancing in the lamplight. That night she was wearing dark, tight-fitting jeans and a simple gray V-neck sweater that clung to her in a way that made it difficult for me to maintain eye contact. Every time she leaned over a box, the sweater would ride up just enough to reveal a sliver of skin at the small of her back, a pale, smooth curve that my eyes kept getting snagged on. Her hair, a cascade of dark brown curls, smelled like vanilla and something else, something clean and sharp. I found myself watching the way her lips moved as she read silently, the faint gloss catching the light, and I'd have to shake my head to clear it, to focus on the brittle, yellowing papers in front of me. We were in this cramped office, maybe 10 by 12 feet, walls lined with filing cabinets. The only technology was an old, beige desktop computer connected to the library's internal network, used for accessing the digital catalog. It was a clunky, outdated terminal, the kind with a bulky CRT monitor that gave off a low, persistent hum. God, this is depressing, Maya said, brushing dust from her jeans. She stretched, arching her back, and the movement pulled her sweater taut across her chest. I looked away, feeling a flush of heat on my neck, and pretended to be intensely interested in a blueprint from 1911. It's not the Rose Room, that's for sure, I agreed, my voice sounding a little hoarse. No kidding. I feel like we're in some forgotten corner of a forgotten corner. She gestured to the computer. Anything useful on the digital side? Or is it all just card catalogs and mothballs? Mostly mothballs, I said. But the terminal links to the main catalog. It's supposed to be more comprehensive than the public-facing one. Lets you see stuff that's been deaccessioned or is in deep storage. I tapped the space bar, waking the monitor from its sleep mode. The green text on the black background glowed in the dim room. It was a simple, text-based interface. A command prompt. Search catalog, go on, Maya said, leaning over my shoulder to look. Her breath was warm on my ear. Look up something fun. See if they have a first folio Shakespeare tucked away down here. I smiled and typed Shakespeare, William, first folio. The system whirred for a moment, the hard drive clicking audibly, then returned a result. Item. Shakespeare, William. First folio, 1623. Status. Not held by nyville.c. Folger Shakespeare Library, location. N/a boring, Maya said, her chin now resting on my shoulder that I could feel the slight pressure of her body against my back that my heart was beating a little faster, and it wasn't from the fear of being caught after hours. Okay, smart, I said, trying to sound casual. You try. She reached around me, her arm brushing against mine, and her fingers danced over the keyboard. She typed Bronte Charlotte Jane Eyre manuscript. The result was the same. Not held by NYPL. We went on like that for a few minutes, a silly game looking up famous books. We knew the library wouldn't have that. It was an excuse for the proximity, for the charged atmosphere in that tiny dusty room that I was hyper-aware of every point where our bodies were almost touching. The curve of her hip was inches from my elbow that I had a sudden, vivid image of what it would feel like to slide my hand up the inside of her thigh, to feel the tension in her leg through the rough denim. I swallowed hard, pushing the thought away. This wasn't the time or the place, but the silence and the isolation were playing tricks on me, blurring the lines between professional collaboration and something much more primal. It was my turn again. I decided to be meta. I typed thesis, Gothic architecture, NYPL. The system paused. The hard drive clicked several times, a stuttering, irregular sound. Then the screen flickered, the green text wavered. For a second, it went completely black. When it came back, the prompt was different. Instead of the search result, it simply said, Catalog access, restricted stacks, SUB basement 3. Search query, Fear catalog? Y/N Maya straightened up. What's that? Restricted stacks? I didn't know there was a sub-basement 3. I thought there were only 2. Me neither, I said, frowning. Must be a glitch, some old part of the system. I moved the cursor to N and hit enter. Nothing happened. The prompt remained. I hit the escape key. Nothing. I typed exit. The letters appeared after the prompt, but the cursor just blinked at me, unmoving. Catalog access. Restricted stacks, UB basement 3 search query, Fear catalog? Y/N exit. Weird, I muttered. I reached for the tower under the desk to reboot it. Wait, Maya said, her voice low. Try it. Why? I don't know. Curiosity? It's probably just an old test interface or something. Maybe it'll show us a funny error message. It was a bad idea. I knew it was a bad idea. But with her standing there, her scent filling the small space, a part of me wanted to show off, to be the guy who wasn't spooked by a flickering computer screen. I moved the cursor to Y and pressed enter. The screen went black again for a full 3 seconds. Then text began to scroll line by line in a slow, deliberate pace as if being typed by an invisible hand. Fear catalog session initiated. Patron, Benjamin Reed. Scanning. Title, The sound of a single hand clapping in an empty house. Author, redacted. Subject, fear of abandonment, fear of being truly, irrevocably alone. Call number, FCAT 782.1. Maya let out a small, nervous laugh. Okay, that's specific and creepy. Fear of being alone? How does it know your name? A cold knot tightened in my stomach. It's logged in with my access credentials, I said, trying to sound rational. It's just pulling my name from the profile. The rest is, I don't know, a random generator. Some programmer's idea of a joke. But the specificity of the fear it listed was unsettling. My father left when I was 7. The sound of a single hand clapping, it evoked a silence so complete that any sound within it was a violation. It hit a little too close to home. The text continued to scroll. Title, The Weight of 1,000 Unseen Eyes. Author, redacted. Subject, social anxiety, fear of being observed, judged and found wanting. Call number, FCAT 912.4. Okay, that's enough, I said, my finger hovering over the power button. Public speaking was my own personal hell. In college I'd once frozen during a presentation, my mind going completely blank under the gaze of 30 classmates. The title was absurd, but the sentiment was piercingly accurate. No, wait, Maya insisted, her curiosity now fully piqued. She put a hand on my wrist, stopping me. Her touch was electric. Do me, type in my name. Maya, this is stupid. It's a glitch. Please? I want to see what it says my secret fear is. She smiled, a mischievous, challenging glint in her eyes. Unless you're scared. That was all it took. I sighed, feigning exasperation. but my heart was thumping against my ribs that I backspaced until the prompt returned. Search query, Fear Catalog? Y/N I typed Maya Vasquez. The system processed it. The hard drive clicked, Word clicked again. The screen flickered, and for a moment I saw a distorted reflection of our faces in the dark glass. Then new text appeared, Patron, Maya Vasquez. Scanning. Title, A Smile That Doesn't Reach the Eyes. Author, redacted. Subject, fear of inauthenticity, fear that one's public self is a hollow facade, and that true self is unlovable. Call number, FCAT 345.7. Maya's playful smile vanished, her face went pale, she took a step back from the desk. What the hell? She whispered that I knew immediately why it had shaken her. Maya was the life of every party, the quickest with a joke, the most confident person in any room, but I'd seen glimpses of something else, a vulnerability she kept carefully hidden. Late at night, after a few drinks, she'd sometimes talk about the pressure to always be on, the fear that people only liked the version of her she performed for them. A smile that doesn't reach the eyes was a perfect, cruel description of that anxiety. It's a coincidence, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. It's just vague enough to apply to anyone. It's not vague, Ben, she said, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. It's precise. We both stared at the screen. The cursor blinked patiently after the call number. The silence in the room was no longer comfortable. It was heavy, expectant. The distant hum of the HVAC system seemed to have stopped. The only sound was our breathing. Then, from the corridor outside the office, we heard a soft, shuffling footstep. We both froze. My eyes met Maya's. Her earlier bravado was gone, replaced by a wide-eyed alertness. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, not the confident, heavy tread of a security guard's boots. This was lighter, a scuffing sound like someone in soft-soled shoes. The footsteps stopped right outside our door. There was no window in the door, just a solid slab of dark wood. We stood there, not moving, not breathing, staring at the thin line of yellow light from the hallway visible under the door. I could see the shadow of 2 feet standing there. My mind raced. It had to be a guard. Maybe he'd seen the light under the door and was checking his schedule, confirming we were supposed to be here. That had to be it. Then a soft, dry cough. It was a old man's cough, phlegmy and weak. The knob on the door turned, slowly. It wasn't the sharp, metallic turn of a key. It was the gentle, testing rotation of someone trying the handle. The door was locked. I'd made sure of it. But the act of someone trying to get in so quietly, so patiently, sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through me. Maya's hand found mine and squeezed, her fingers cold. The knob turned back to its original position. The shadow under the door shifted. We heard the shuffling footsteps again, moving away down the hall, fading into silence. We stood like that for a full minute, holding hands, listening to the nothingness. What was that? Maya finally breathed. A guard? I said, trying to sound sure. Just making his rounds. They try the doors? Maybe. Procedure. She didn't look convinced. She let go of my hand and walked to the door, putting her ear against it. I watched the way her jeans tightened across her backside as she leaned forward, a detail my brain registered with a bizarre, inappropriate clarity amidst the fear. She listened for a moment, then turned back to me, shaking her head. Nothing. I turned back to the computer screen. The fear catalog prompt was still there, blinking. An idea, both terrifying and compelling, occurred to me. What are you doing? Maya asked, seeing my hand move to the keyboard. I'm going to see if it has a record for that. I typed log entry restricted stacks access. The system processed it. No record found. I tried security patrol log mezzanine 1. No record found. Then, on a whim, driven by a cold, sinking feeling, I typed the words that had been echoing in my head since the footsteps faded. Title: The Man Who Stands in Hallways. The hard drive didn't just click this time. It groaned, a low, grinding sound that made the whole tower vibrate. The screen flickered violently, the green text fragmenting into digital snow before resolving. Title: The Man Who Stands in Hallways. Author: redacted. Subject: fear of the passive observer. The entity that watches and waits, whose intentions are unknown and whose presence is a constant, low-grade threat. The fear that you are an experiment. Call number, FCAT 001.9 Maya gasped. Ben, stop it, turn it off, now. I didn't need to be told twice that I reached down and yanked the power cord from the back of the tower. The monitor died with a soft thwomp, the light from the screen sucking into a tiny vanishing dot in the center. The room was plunged into a deeper darkness, illuminated only by the single desk lamp. The silence was absolute. We should go, Maya said. Her voice was trembling that I nodded, my throat too dry to speak that I started shoving papers into my backpack with clumsy, fumbling hands that my heart was hammering. The fear catalog was one thing, a bizarre, unsettling glitch. But the footsteps, the cough, the trying of the door handle, and then the catalog confirming the nature of the fear it inspired. It felt like a feedback loop of dread that it felt intentional. We packed up in a frantic, silent hurry that I slung my backpack over my shoulder and went to the door, unlocking it as quietly as I could that I peered out into the hallway that it was empty, a long, dimly lit corridor lined with identical dark wood doors. The air was still and cold. Clear, I whispered that we stepped out, and I locked the door behind us. The click of the lock was deafening in the silence. We started walking quickly towards the main staircase that would lead us down to the grand lobby and the exit. Our footsteps echoed, and I found myself trying to step lightly, to minimize the sound that we were about halfway to the staircase when I saw him. He was standing at the far end of the hallway, partly obscured by shadow. An old man, tall and gaunt, wearing a dark, ill-fitting suit that looked decades out of date. His posture was stooped, and his hands were clasped in front of him. That he wasn't moving, that he was just standing there, facing us. That I grabbed Maya's arm, pulling her to a stop. She followed my gaze and let out a small, choked sound. It was the man from the catalog. The man who stands in hallways. That we were frozen, caught in his silent observation. That I couldn't see his face clearly from that distance. Just a pale, blurry oval in the gloom. My mind was screaming at me to run, but my feet felt rooted to the polished marble floor. This was the fear made flesh, the passive observer, the experiment. Then he moved. That he didn't walk towards us. That he simply turned, with an unnerving smoothness, and